So I'm playing through Wolfenstein II, the new Colossus, and I'm really frustrated with the first half of the game. Now, for story reasons, BJ's not feeling so hot. So it would make sense why the first chunk of the game would be very, very difficult, because it's very difficult for BJ himself. However, that was represented in the fact that you only have 50 health. But the level design also makes that like way harder, like almost too hard, you could say. So Wolfenstein, in the game, you're fighting Nazis and the enemies have hit scan damage, which is, they're basically non-projectile based, so if an enemy has line of sight, they'll basically hit you, and you can't exactly dodge it like you can in Doom, where all the enemies use projectiles. And enemies also rush you, unlike in Doom, where enemies tend to stay behind so that you can rush them. See, with Doom, it's a whole aggressive player thing, but in Wolfenstein, it's more about trying to keep yourself safe. But that's not exactly how Wolfenstein builds yourself to play. I mean, you're supposed to be Terror Billy, the slaughterer of all these thousands of Nazis, but the game doesn't make you feel like you're able to do that. They make fighting Nazis very, very difficult, as if it was in a Call of Duty game. See, you don't have regenerating health. Well, not that much regenerating health. So you need to pick up med packs. However, the amount of damage the enemies do, especially on higher difficulties, which is what I tried to play as, is way too much for non-regenerating health, especially with their undodgeable hit scan damage, and the fact that they like to just crowd you from behind. And unlike in Doom, there's no way playing aggressively, it doesn't reward you with more health and whatnot. In fact, in the harder sections in the beginning, I often found myself winning just by hiding in a corner and taking pot shots from behind cover. And that's not exactly what Wolfenstein's about. At least that's not what the previous two games, the New Order and the Old Blood, were like. Those games, it was much easier to run and gun and take guys out. And those didn't have the automatic pickup systems. See, in those games, you had to manually pick up everything. But in Wolfenstein 2, you do have the ability to automatically pick them up, which is really nice. However, the pickup radius is very small, so it's a real crapshoot whether or not you'll actually pick up anything good, or what you want by just running past it. You might have to stop and pick something up, which by doing that makes you vulnerable to Nazi gunfire. Same with reloading, makes you vulnerable to Nazi gunfire. There's all these systems in the game that don't support the run and gun attitude, and thus the game feels much harder. Now in the later half of the game, when you get your 100% health back, the game feels a bit easier, but that's mostly because the level design is a bit different. Everything is a bit more narrow in hallways, so you can see pretty much all the enemies coming, because they're coming forward towards you in your line of sight where you can see them. Now, people would say linear games were a big issue, and that's why they try to do these more open level designs. But in a first-person shooter, a game where your vision is very narrow, you have to compensate for the enemies that you can't see coming, which result in a lot of cheap deaths. And boy, did I have a lot of cheap deaths in the first half of Wolfenstein 2, when there's a lot of angles where enemies can come and kill me from. Games like BioShock and Uncharted put systems in where enemies have a 0% chance of hitting you with their first couple shots, so that you'll know where enemies are and then you can shoot them back. But Wolfenstein, that's not the case, at least not that I know of. I'll constantly be killed by an enemy I've never seen because he's shooting me from behind, and the game does a really poor job of damage indication. Like, I can't even see how much damage I'm taking and from where, because it's so nondescript. The game makes me feel less like Terror Billy and more like Inconvenience-Billy. At least in that first half. It's not like this is challenging. See, a challenge is a clear goal that you can obtain. Getting dropped from full health and armor down to 0 in a second because you couldn't possibly see an enemy isn't a challenge, it's bullshit. So basically, I'm going to be playing the rest of this game on the easiest difficulty. A handful of bronze trophies is not worth the suffering. Speaking of which, why is the hardest difficulty only a bronze trophy? It's already impossible in do or die. What's going on? That should be a gold. The district missions are pretty nice because you get to go back to old locations and find collectibles you missed. Although I do wish that there was more variation for when you returned. I mean, with the exception of that film set place, everything is pretty much the same. Oh, come on! Plus, the story and writing are top-notch. The audition sequence is probably one of my favorite moments from gaming this year. I won't go too much into it. There's always another gator in the bayou.